Hey, Charles Demler, Project Charles, trying to end the problem of global warming. Um, Once again, I had no idea that I would have my family arguing against me and colluding against me, even on my mom's deathbed. It's just been horrific. Past 20 years trying to deal with them and my mother, who was on the board of a $1.4 billion aid organization and she promised to get me help. That's the only reason why in 2005 that I moved up to Oregon was because mom was on the board of a $1.4 billion aid organization and I had a solution to global warming and I thought I'd get help. And I am continuing to state that my solution controlling, capturing, turbocharging, and um, and depleting hurricanes would work. The flood control would work, increasing agriculture so it could feed to 20 billion people would work. Um, I hope to table at the 2025 PIELC, and you can stop by and hear more about it. But yeah, it should work. I've gone over it with some head engineers at Caltrans, had Caltrans behind me, but since my mom and with her $1.4 billion organization said that they'd help, and Caltrans got me up to the president's desk, but I failed to get any help from Caltrans, even though the head engineer said that solution should work. But in going crazy, listening to dumbass reasons why nobody should lift a finger to help, I am just totally disgusted because we lost the Florida Reef, 90% of it, twice in the past 10 years, and things aren't slowing down. And yet people are arguing against any form of geoengineering. Luckily, they're getting out of office. No more of the crew that goes and sits there and says they're environmentalists and then goes against any form of geoengineering because it's scary. I am just totally horrified by, Biden and Obama and all the others that sit there and say that they're so caring about global warming, but won't lift a finger of help. Get them out of office. Go away. Quit lying that you give a damn. If I had talked to AOC, maybe I'd get some funding, but her people don't want to do it. So anyhow, I'm really happy that Trump is getting in office. He's the president of revenge and for getting things done and turning this world golden. I've come out with some statements, but yeah, if him and Elon Musk could sit there and help out, maybe I could say that Elon Musk leaves a golden attire. But anyhow, I'm just sick of it. And we've got apparently there's people that invest in colleges and give money to colleges like MIT, and MIT comes out with papers that are like totally anti seaweed sequestration. I ran by my first solution of controlling hurricanes by MIT, but they don't give a damn because I wasn't a student of MIT. They didn't offer me anything to get there, and I was expecting help from my mom, Ruth Demler, on the board of St. Vincent de Paul, to give some fucking help, but they never did. I still am baffled and horrified. Anyhow, so they like to make arguments against sequestering CO2, and I read an article and then I went over figures about how much CO2 seaweed sequesters, and I'm going to stand by them. That I could get um, using 35 million square kilometers of ocean, I could sequester 200 billion tons of CO2 per year. The people against everything point out that seaweed doesn't really sequester the CO2 of all the CO2 it captures because it degrades, and all the CO2, or most all of the CO2 that seaweed sequesters, gets put out into the ocean. Well, I can say that when you talk about CO2 sequestering. Don't just say that it only sequesters so much, because in order to really sequester the CO2, it must integrate them into the soil, for permanent CO2 sequestration. But I'm just talking about sequestration because I would be taking the seaweed and making permafrost out of it and totally sequestering it that way. But since that's not part of their thinking, because they're so stupid or arrogant, dumb as crap, they have to revise the estimates of CO2 sequestering down to what they could prove it sequesters, which ain't crap, compared to saying you can get 200 billion tons of CO2 sequestered and in 35 million square kilometers. Totally different figures. For their consideration, I would only get like, I think there would be like 731, million 300 or 730 or something like that, million tons of CO2 sequestered per year instead of even a billion, because they're talking about sequestering the CO2 directly into the ocean and not having the seaweed, because it normally what happens with seaweed, it'll degrade, and the carbon stored in the seaweed that degrades will enter the ocean again, but that's not part of my process. And it's really discouraging to sit there and have to fight all these battles with all these people that are coming up with all these reasons. But for the MIT people to sit there and talk about it being a joke and saying that they're know-it-alls and basically, you should listen to us. We published on this and it got through the publication. It's like, fuck you. Just disgusted in them. If you want to talk science, let's talk science. If you want to talk garbage, talk garbage, but don't sit there and say you know it all. It's kind of arrogant, and not only arrogant, but it's shutting down any process of getting the work done by people using arguments by people from MIT, because I think MIT is a good institution that puts out facts. Anyhow, let me go over some of these figures. I'm really hoping to get a different camera set up with two cameras, and then I'll go over this stuff properly. But until I get my 2 cameras set up, I just wanted to get this out there. And that's like a lot of my other videos. I need to get this stuff professionally done and do it and take time and effort to do it. And it's ridiculous. I thought I had funding, and everybody can just, all they care about is stealing up here, going against my mom's will, going against my mom's wishes, forsaking my mother, and then thinking that I'm some spoiled brat that should be treated like crap. Who gives a crap if I was spoiled or not? I'm sure I was spoiled a lot compared to other people in other parts of the world and other people everywhere. And a lot of people are very much more spoiled than I am. Meanwhile, millions of people died and quintillions of animals no longer supported by the earth. And yeah, anyhow, Project Drawdown. Let's see. Yeah, Project Drawdown is saying globally nearly 4.8 billion hectares are suitable from algae growth. Um, and they're talking about in 2005, global farmed microalgae production was estimated to be um, at 13.5 million metric tons, which is nothing compared to a billion tons. Yeah, the farming microalgae for food production is not there, and comparing that to what I'm trying to do is like a joke. See, carbon sequestration by natural seaweed stands. See, uh, while seaweeds fix carbon rapidly and store it for a time in biomass, only a portion of the sea is sequestered on a time scale of centuries or millennia. Some of the fixed sea is grazed, then mineralized to CO2. In some cases, grazing can remove a large fraction of the seaweed biomass. 82% of kelp productivity is removed by grazing. So, anyways, they're coming out with facts that, like over 90% of the CO2 is gone and not sequestered that the seaweeds take in. That's their argument there, and that argument is used by others. Over here in this other paper, they're talking about seaweed afforestation at large scales exclusively for carbon sequestration, and they go over the risks, the viability, and the knowledge. And they talk about an area of 400,000 square kilometers, and they talk about using the rafts in that area would be needed for 1 gigaton of CO2 fixation. In other words, that's 1 billion tons of CO2 that would be in seaweed. And other people are talking about, how it'd be like 90% less in their calculations of seaweed. So, and even with this, I think that number is low, because they don't want to be scrutinized more, especially if they're just giving one number. So this number would be about, if I had 35 million square kilometers, instead of getting 200 billion tons a year, I think I figured using these figures, it would get in like the 30 billion tons a year, maybe 36 billion tons a year figures. And then that would mean that I would need an additional 6 times 400,000 square kilometers, or, um, 2.4 million square kilometers. But not all that stuff's going to be done on rafts. And a lot of other plants in the ocean could sequester 4 times as much than seaweed. Here's some bulk kelp facts that people should know about, though, too. A couple years ago, or a few years ago, we lost some 70 to 90% of the bulk kelp off of the coast of California. And it's a large area, huge area. And it was done because of the sea urchins being able to grow without, to be able to grow without the starfish killing them. and they just grew in population and just wiped it out. Um, yeah, the kelp provides numerous animals with nutrients and habitat, including kelp crabs, red sea urchins, kelp greenling, kelp perch, Pacific herring, um, and we just lost so much life because of the loss of that seaweed. That's the type of seaweed or other types that I would consider growing. And I did have an idea using buoys, just like the other people were using platforms, to get around the ocean traffic. But I've thought of other ways to improve on that. Um, this talks about how the urchins killed them off. Um, it could reach heights up to 30 meters or 100 feet tall and grow up 10 inches per day. Um, and that's kind of fast. And they talk about bamboo growing to 100 or 40 inches per day. Yeah, you could use both to sequester, and both you can sit there and stick in permafrost, and both will have that carbon sequestered for a long, long time, as long as you keep up the process and shoot out more water that turns into ice that will melt in the next year. This one, they talked about the sea star wasting syndrome, and it's partially caused by ocean heat and partially by ocean acidification. Just disgusting. Um, and with that, I'm still convinced that I could get 200 billion tons of CO2 per year in about 35 million square kilometers of ocean land, with 48 billion square kilometers available. And the place where I got that we had 48 million square kilometers available to plant seaweed was done by a study, and that was done a few years ago. And they had to update that study to sit there and go against problems with the sea ice encroachment, nutrients, um, um, what else? Ocean traffic, and some areas of the ocean considered to be what is that? Critical habitat where they don't allow for farming or other stuff to be done there. But if you there are ways around all of those problems, except for destroying that habitat. But all that's going to die anyway unless we fix the problem. And we need to fix the ocean acidification problem, or we just won't have any fish left. And if you think that I'm joking, animals are having problem with their larvae creating more animals in the ocean as we speak. I'm not sure how many animals. I'm not sure which ones are worse affected. Probably all of the animals are having a little problem creating backbones and cartilage. But the problem with the the amount of phytoplankton in the ocean has shifted from more of a mix of phytoplankton with backbone to now it's more phytoplankton without backbone, which presumably caused the death of all those billions of birds that one year. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with those birds, or if it was just millions of birds, but I think it was billions of birds. And I still have the picture of that little baby bird just crawling at me. And thinking, why not feed them? But there's like millions all around, so they're all dying. So anyhow, just using floats, though, if we're considering this to be a $1 trillion problem, and yes, it is a $1 trillion problem. It's affecting the economy's trillions of dollars per year. You could always make arguments against it, like, oh, you can't prove that millions of people died from starvation due to global warming. And you can't, they fished out the Indian Ocean. They destroyed their environment by having too many people, cut down all the trees, cut down all the, killed all the small animals. And now they've overfished the Indian Ocean and they're still having 5, 10 kids each. But yeah, that's caused a lot of the environmental destruction around the world. It's just the population crisis. And yeah. Okay, so if we needed to go through creating rafts or buoys, I would go with buoys under the ocean, and they would go up and down through using wave energy to power them. And they would have a few more additional benefits that I may go over in the future with some people. I don't know. But yeah, there's tremendous benefits of using that area. And that would just mean having to have 6 more, or 6 times the area in the ocean. And there's plenty of ocean to use the buoy system to create seaweed. And yes, another argument was that it would be areas too far away from ports to make it economically viable or whatever to get the seaweed. And I'm not worried about that. Another thing was having the seaweed downstream from a river that put out nitrogen, because nitrogen is a big problem. Not having enough nitrogen. So you'd want to use the nitrogen coming out of places that just pollute the waterways with nitrogen due to their chicken farming, hog farming, rice, wheat, grains, all that farming using a lot of fertilizer. You're going to have a lot of nitrogen left over that's going to go into the ocean. And there's a big problem, they say, with seaweed because it won't get enough nitrogen. But if you use that, that'd be fine. Other people, like the organization talking about the using rafts underwater that would lift up and down to avoid sea traffic. And, at night it would get nutrients and the day it would get sun. Yeah, so what was I saying about them? Anyhow, so you'd have the more area. You'd be able to get the 200 billion tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere, take it up in oil tankers, take it up to the north, and deposit it in ice. Make permafrost out of it. Yeah, I stand by my words. I should alter it though to say between 30 billion tons and 200 billion tons a year of CO2 can be sequestered in 35 million square kilometers of ocean area. Because there is that variance, and I'm not positive that you get 200 billion tons. That's just going over figures that I went over the internet that showed how much CO2 could be sequestered by different forms of seaweed per million square kilometers. And I stand by my statement that if we had taken that seagrass, or what was it? Um, sargassum or sargassum seaweed or whatever it was that polluted the Florida area from sections down by Cuba of ocean where the seaweed grew up, and then over 1 billion tons of CO2 was sequestered in that seaweed that drifted in that area, and that could have all been picked up and taken, and just grow it naturally, mostly though, and you get billions of tons out per year. Add more growth to more section of ocean land, and you'll get 200 billion tons. Anyhow, that's about all I have to say for now. Hopefully, I'll do a better recording of this someday in the future. Hopefully, I'll table at the 2025 PIELC. Hopefully, I'll get this thing going now that I know I can no longer rely on, my mom's dead. I wanted to work on this with my mom. That's what people do in families. They work on things together. And she was great working with the government. I no longer have her. I no longer have access to a $1.4 billion a year organization that could have easily helped if it wasn't the arguments by my brother, Dr. David Demler. Well, have a good one, everybody.